let's read this. Oh, but before we start that, I thought we'd do it just a little more on the teachings of Jesus each week. Okay. And this week I have this scripture, Matthew 7:21. It is not everyone who merely says to me, my Lord, who will enter into the kingdom of heaven, but he who does the will of my Father in heaven. And remember, the message of Jesus was the kingdom of heaven on earth, or the counsel or the guidance of God, or heaven. We interchange heaven and God. And so he's merely what he's getting at. Okay, remember, he's talking to Pharisees and whatnot, who are very, very pious and righteous about the law. It's kind of like nowadays, they go to church, they went to the temple, they believed they practiced all the laws, and that meant that they were good. But what Jesus is saying, it's not just those. You can do all of that, but if you don't follow the guidance of God the Father in heaven, well, that's another situation. So I thought we'd just do one of these scriptures like this each week, because we are studying the teachings of Jesus. And okay, so now back to love your enemies. And we're going to spend some time on these two particular verses. You have heard it said that it is said, be kind to your friend and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies, bless anyone who curses you, do good to anyone who hates you, and pray for those who carry you away by force and persecute you. This is a tall order, okay? But we're going to look at love your enemies first, and then we will visit the rest of the parts of those verses also. Now, so we need to start out with, okay, what is love? And, we have the idea and that love is sentimentality and oh, I love her. Do you love him? All of that. Well, there's nothing wrong with that, but it gets confusing when it says, okay, you have to love your enemies. Well, now, to love your enemies, you don't have to be all sentimental and all huggy and mushy and all of that. That's not what it means. So I thought I would just pull some of these quotes about love and just to kind of set the stage. Okay, and the first one I have is from Leo Tolstoy, believe it or not. Let me read it and then we talk about Tolstoy a little bit. Okay, love is life. Everything that I understand only because I love. Everything exists only because I love. Everything is united by it alone. Love is God, and to die means that I, a particle of love, shall return to the general and eternal source. And that was Leo Tolstoy in 1903. So you see, some of this is new thought, but it's been around a long time. And the thing you need to know about Tolstoy is that Tolstoy actually I guess I could use the word, he kind of pioneered the nonviolent teachings of Jesus. And so Tolstoy has many writings about Jesus and beliefs. And then Gandhi came along after Tolstoy. Gandhi read Tolstoy, who, like I say, had set out the nonviolent ways according to Jesus in the gospel, and so Tolstoy, Gandhi, and Martin Luther King also. So that's that whole nonviolent thing. Okay, and then we have Dr. Lumsa. Love is the hidden force which at birth binds your body and your soul together until it separates them at death. Very profound, but that's our Dr. Lumsa. And that comes from a book that he wrote that is just really, really cool. And it's called And the Scroll Opened. And of course it is out of print now, but he has the writings in there in that truly unique Near Eastern style. Anyway, and finally, love is the only force capable of transforming an enemy into a friend. And that was our Martin Luther King Jr. Okay, so we have an idea that to love your enemies isn't what we usually think about love and do you love them and all that. It's kind of like an essence. And remember, God is love. He says love is God, that God is love. And so, and God is spirit too. So that can maybe just give you an idea that we're not talking about the love that we know pretty much in our world. All right, so what is love? Now, from Aramaic, right, there are two words used in the Bible. There's two Aramaic words used for love, and they're slightly different, but they are used interchangeably. So the first word for love, which we use a whole lot, is hubba. And remember, Aramaic words have several different meanings. Okay, so hubba meant to warm, to kindle, or to set on fire. And to set on fire and the burning desire, that's the kind of love, that's the that's the love between man and woman and people, whatever. Okay, and then they use the word rahma, and it means just slightly different, to delight in or to be friendly. So with love your enemies, we pulled out of those two words. Love your enemies means to be warm towards, to be kindly, or to be well disposed towards. And that's what we're talking about. And that's what Jesus was talking about when he said, love your enemies. Okay? Now, who is your enemy? All right, and I have these definitions here. A person who is actively opposed, oops, a typo, or hostile to someone or something. Okay, and then I like this other definition that was in there. It's a thing that harms or weakens something else, and I would put someone else in there too, because enemies, we know that an enemy, you're going to be opposed to an enemy or possibly hostile, but sometimes we don't realize that an enemy harms us and weakens us also. So I just thought, well, that's the definition. And so we need to think about in our own lives, okay, who are these enemies? And evil-wise,
Things aren't more popular,
is there not someone that,
just for even like commuters. Look how good that is.
a thing that harms or weakens someone, something else? Okay, now, so we know that he says, love your enemies. Okay, and we've got an idea of what the love is, and what an enemy is. And the one thing I did not put down there was the enemy, but it's obvious. An enemy, when there's wars or fighting, then you have an enemy, another nation against another nation. So to demonstrate why you would love your enemy, we're going to go to the Old Testament, and we're going to go to the story of Elisha, not Elijah, but Elisha, and the king of Aram. Now, hold on just a minute. I gotta switch. Wait. Hold on. Okay, so this is a really cool story if you've never read it, or even if you have. Okay, this is 2 Kings chapter 6. Now we usually use this story when we're talking about mysticism, and so we'll get you get a lesson in mysticism also. Okay, so here's the way it goes. Then the king of Aram warred against Israel and took counsel with his servants, saying, in such and such a place shall we lie in wait. Now, just a couple of things here so that you know the Israel that they're talking about here was the northern, the 10 northern tribes. And because you have to understand that the 12 tribes split after King Solomon's son came around. They split, and so you had 10 tribes in the north, and you had Judah and Benjamin in the south. So what we're talking about here is Israel, those 10 tribes. And so there were fighting with the Arameans, so to speak. And so, and as we say here, Arameans as the modern day Syrians, okay? And then it'll be talking about Samaria. And at that point in time, Samaria was the capital of Israel. So you can remember that. Okay. So, so the king of Aram has his plan to lie in wait and attack Israel. Now, and the prophet of God said to the king of Israel, saying, beware that you do not pass this place, for the Arameans are lying in wait. Now, remember, the prophet of God was Elisha, and he was a prophet, prophets had the spiritual intuition. They were guided by the divine. They were called the prophets of God. And so Elijah, through his intuition, knew where the king of Aram waited for Israel. So Elijah would pass on the location of the Arameans, and the Arameans got a little perturbed. And the king of Israel sent to the place of which the prophet of God told him and warned him about it. Not once, not twice. So it happened several times. So based on this information, the king of Israel moved his army away from the king of Aram's army several times. Okay. Therefore, the king of Aram was sore troubled because of this thing. And he called his servants and said to them, will you not show me who of us is for the king of Israel? He suspected a traitor among his troops because he had to keep moving because Israel kept moving, and he just didn't realize what was going on. Okay, and one of his servants answered and said, it's not one of us, my lord, O king, but Elisha, the prophet who is in Israel, tells the king of Israel the thing that you plan in your bedchamber. Very frustrating. And he said, this is the king of Aram said, go and see where he is, that I may send and take him. And it was told him, saying, behold, he is in Dothan. Therefore, he sent there horsemen and chariots and a great army, and they came by night and surrounded the city. All right. The Arameans have surrounded the city where Elisha is. And when the servant of the prophet of God arose early and went out, behold, an army surrounded the city, both with horses and chariots. And he said to him, alas, my master, what shall we do? Okay. And we would say the same thing. Elisha said to the servant, fear not, for those who are with us are more than those who are with them. Okay, he's referring to the divine. He's referring to his intuition, his communication with the divine. And Elisha prayed to the Lord and said, "O Lord, open his eyes that he may see." And this is the servant, because the servant clearly didn't understand what Elisha was saying, because all the servant saw physically was all those chariots and around surrounding the place. But Elisha prayed, and through intuition, and the Lord opened the eyes of the young man, and he saw. This is a vision now. And he saw, and behold, the mountain was full of horses and chariots of fire round about Elisha. So Elisha prayed, God was protecting them. Now, but the plan is really cool. Okay, and when they came down to him, once again, Elijah prayed to the Lord and said, smite these people with dimness of vision. And he smote them with dimness according to the word of Elisha. And basically all that happened is that they became confused. There was no blindness or anything, but they became confused. Now watch what Elisha's doing. And Elisha said to them, "This is not the way, neither is this the city. Follow me, and I will bring you to the man whom you seek," which was the king of Israel. But he led them, I'm sorry, okay, no, which was Elisha. Okay, Elisha fooled them because they didn't know who Elisha was. They didn't know what he looked like. And so Elijah just said, "I'll bring you to the man whom you seek," which was him himself. But instead, he led them to Samaria, which is where the king of Israel was, because that was the capital of Israel. So Elijah led the servants to believe that he was not the man they were looking for, and when in all actuality, he was. Okay. And when they were come into Samaria, Elisha said, "O Lord, open the eyes of these men that they may see." And behold, they were in the midst of Samaria. What a surprise. They just did not realize where they were so intent on finding Elisha that he just fooled them the whole way. Okay. And the king of Israel said to Elijah, when he saw them, "My father, shall I slay them? Shall I slay them?" And he answered, "You shall not slay them. Would you slay those whom you have taken captive with your sword and with your bow? Set bread and water before them, that they may eat and drink and go to their master." So he prepared for them a great banquet. Now, this is the enemy now, folks. He prepared for them a great banquet, and when they had eaten and drunk, they went to their master. And so here is the why. Why love your enemy? So the raiders of Aram came no more across the border of Israel. And that's love your enemies, and that's why, because they did not ever come to attack Israel again. All right, that's one of the whys. Now I got to switch here. Okay, there we go. Now I have a story. I have another story, and this is why love your enemy. We're going to try to get examples, and we'll get even more practical examples, because we teach this. I mean, Dr. Eric teaches it and whatnot, but we don't ever know if it really has an effect on people, if people can really do this or accept it. So, who I got? George. You wanna read something, George? Would you mind?
Or what would you like me to read?
Right, it's on your screen there. Why love your enemy? Starting with Lincoln. See that?
No, my screen still has the so he prepared for them a great banquet.
Oh, yes, it does. Hold on. Hold on. I haven't used two different things before, so forgive me. Okay, there we go. Thank you, George. I just didn't realize how that worked. Okay. All right.
All right, I gotta move this out the way. Hold on 1 second.
Here,
Okay.
I can start it. I'll start it. Okay.
Ready? Okay. Lincoln, why I love your enemy. Lincoln tried love and left for all history a magnificent drama for reconciliation. When he was campaigning for the presidency, one of his arch enemies was a man named Stanton. For some reason, Stanton hated Lincoln. He used every ounce of his energy to degrade him in the eyes of the public. So deep-rooted was Stanton's hate for Lincoln that he uttered unkind words about his physical appearance and sought to embarrass him at every point with the bitterest diatribes. But in spite of this, Lincoln was elected president of the United States. Then came the period when he had to select his cabinet, which would consist of persons who would be his most intimate associates in implementing this program. He started choosing men here and there for the various secretaryships. The day finally came for Lincoln to select the man to fill the all-important post of Secretary of War. Can you imagine whom? Oh,
Yeah, go ahead.
Can you imagine whom Lincoln chose to fill his post? None other than the man named Stanton. There was an immediate uproar in the inner circle when the news began to spread. Advisor after advisor was heard saying, "Mr. President, you are making a mistake. Do you know this man Stanton? Are you familiar with all the ugly things he said about you? He is your enemy. He will seek to sabotage your program. Have you thought this through, Mr. President?" Mr. Lincoln's answer was terse and to the point. "Yes, I know Mr. Stanton. I'm aware of all the terrible things he has said about me. But after looking over the nation, I find he is the best man for the job." Stanton became Abraham Lincoln's Secretary of War and rendered an invaluable service to his nation and his president.
Great story.
Indeed.
Now, through the power of love, Lincoln transformed an enemy into a friend. It was the same attitude that made it possible for Lincoln to speak a kind word about the South during the Civil War when feeling was most bitter. Asked by a shocked bystander how he could do this, Lincoln said, "Madam, do I not destroy my enemies when I make them my friends?" Okay, so that gives you a glimpse of love your enemies, a couple stories. And what we're going to do, for next week, all right, and I'd like everybody to consider this, all right? Who is my enemy? Do I have an enemy? Okay. How can I make that enemy my friend? And why do I want to? In other words, what would the benefits be? And we're going to have discussion. And hopefully one of you will have an example. I do have an example, but I'm going to hold it until next week. And I have a couple more practical stories to consider next week. Now, the other thing that we're going to do is, remember, we are 501c3, and we appreciate and thank you for all your contributions. Yes. And of course, this book, if you really want to know the insight, the Aramaic insight on Jesus, that's the book to have or to get. Now,